Electricast.
When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite. Obey your thirst.
Introducing Meta Ray-Ban Display, the world's most advanced AI glasses. With a full color display built into the lens of the glasses, it's there when you need it and gone when you don't. Send and receive messages, translate or caption live conversations, collaborate with Meta AI, and more. Be one of the first to try Meta Ray-Ban Display. Visit meta.com/Meta Ray-Ban Display to book a demo and find your pair.
Welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design, where we celebrate women who are shaping their lives one extraordinary day at a time. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, self-care coach for women who are ready to make self-care a priority to support them in life and business. Every week, I'll be speaking with inspiring women from various walks of life who will share their personal journeys and will discover how they have fearlessly carved their own paths as business owners, passionately pursuing their dreams and creating a meaningful impact on their communities. So let's get started. Good morning and welcome back to Extraordinary Life by Design podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet. And before we get into today's topic, I want to name something you may already recognize, but you haven't had language for it yet. If you're listening in today, it's not because you lack intention or that you don't have awareness around what you say yes to. It's not because you don't think about your decisions. You do think about them. You're intentional. You move fast because you're capable of moving fast. You've already tried being more mindful with your schedule, more intentional with your time and what you say yes to. And you've already tried tightening how you decide. You've tried being more selective when things feel big. And you've already tried discipline, structure, and follow through to hold your pace. And still, by the end of the day, something still feels off. Not enough to stop you, but enough that you notice your energy doesn't feel the same as it did at the start of your day. It's not gone. It's just thinner, more spread out. And this is important because it's not because you did anything wrong. It's because all of those strategies, being more intentional, managing your time, your schedule, trying to be more selective when things feel big, relying on discipline, structure, and follow through to hold the line, they were all built to manage behavior, not to protect your energy in the moments that matter most. You know, the small moments, the easy to justify moments, the ones that don't look like much when they pop in, that don't register as costly in the moment that they enter your day. But in hindsight, they still take something with them when they pass through. And if you've been with me for the last few weeks, you might already feel this shift happening. You're noticing the yes, you're noticing the cost, and now you're starting to notice the after effects when your focus feels less contained. Your pace feels heavier or harder to hold, and your energy feels slightly off without a clear reason why. Not because you're suddenly more sensitive and you're slowed down long enough to feel everything, but because your awareness is finally catching up to how your energy actually moves. And that changes everything, because what you're starting to see is that you need a way of deciding that accounts for energy, not just intention. It's about protecting the energy you already depend on to live the life you love. And today we're going to unpack what's really happening when your energy feels off, when access is being decided without intention. So let me bring you into a moment that might feel familiar. You're starting a new day, one that's supposed to feel straightforward. You've got all your ducks in a row. Your mind is clear enough to hold what you're working on. You're moving through things with that familiar, capable rhythm you trust. Nothing feels urgent. You're just in it. Then something small comes in. A quick message from a team member, a small request from a client, one of those things that barely registers as a decision. And without thinking about it, you adjust, you respond. You shift, you fold it in. It's automatic, almost invisible. You don't pause because there's nothing to pause for, right? It's manageable. You can handle it, so you keep going. And in that moment, nothing feels wrong. But later, and this is the part that's harder to explain, something changes. Not dramatically, not enough to stop you, just enough that your focus doesn't settle the same way. Just enough that re-entering your workflow takes more effort than usual, and just enough that your pace feels slightly less contained. It feels more forced. You're still moving moving, you're still productive. It's just costing you more than it should. And if you tried to explain it, you couldn't point to a reason because for all intents and purposes, nothing big happened. No line was crossed. No obvious mistake was made. You didn't overcommit. You didn't drop anything. You didn't do anything that felt wrong in the moment. And yet, something about the day feels less clean than it did before. But as usual, you find the way to justify it, right? And you tell yourself what you always tell yourself, that it's just one of those days, I'll shake it off. But there's a question that lingers underneath that you don't stay with long enough to answer. And that's, why does this keep happening on days that are supposed to feel easy? And if that moment I just walked you through felt familiar, if you could feel yourself inside that day, then today's conversation is going to give you language for something you've already been noticing and help you connect the dots on what you've been feeling. Because what you're noticing is that something is getting accessed that you didn't account for. It's information, data to help you catch the leak while it's still small so you can keep your energy where you actually need it. And today we're going to dive into that data long enough for it to finally make sense. So here's what we're going to unpack. And as you hear each part, I want you to notice where your body responds, where you feel it in your body before your mind catches up to explain it. Because that response will tell you exactly which part you've been living inside of. First, we're going to look at why high-achieving women like you can be thoughtful, intentional, and discerning, who you already consider your time, your priorities, and your commitments, and still feel energetically exposed by the end of the day. Not because you don't know how to say no, but because the way you've been deciding access was built to manage behavior, not to protect your energy in moments that feel reasonable, small, and easy to absorb. Then we're going to name the real costs of unclear energy access, not in theory, but in the exact places you already feel it. The way your focus fragments after a few small pivots, the way your momentum takes more effort to sustain, and the way your pace feels heavier later in the day, even though nothing derailed you or demanded a clear decision. And the way your pace feels heavier later in the day because you subconsciously redirected your energy in moments that never felt big enough to question. And finally, we're going to talk about the access shift that actually protects your energy without saying no to everything, without becoming rigid, and without forcing yourself into a pace that requires you to override how you naturally operate. This is not about you pulling back. It's about deciding what gets through. Because when access is clear, your energy stays contained, your momentum stays clean, and your pace works for you instead of costing you later. So if you've ever thought, I'm intentional, so why does my energy still feel spread thin sometimes? This conversation's for you, and we're going to take it one layer deeper because there's a belief you've been living from for a long time. Maybe one you've never acknowledged before, but one that's been quietly shaping how you move through your day. And it sounds something like this. If it feels manageable, I can just handle it. If I know I can do it, there's no reason to stop. If it's small, I know I can bang it out quickly and it won't stop my flow. This belief makes sense, especially for someone like you, because you're capable. Your work ethic isn't something you turn on, it's who you are. You don't fall apart under pressure. Instead, you organize, you execute, you adjust when needed. So when something shows up that on paper seems reasonable, a small request, a quick shift, you don't experience it as a decision. You experience it as part of your flow. And pausing to evaluate something you already know you can handle feels inefficient, unnecessary, almost silly. Why stop to think when you're already moving, right? But here's the part most of us miss. This belief doesn't fail you when things feel heavy. It fails you when things feel easy because the moments that drain you the most aren't always the ones that trigger resistance. They're the ones you absorb without noticing. Not because you lack discernment or that you overcommit your time. It's because you've equated being capable with giving unlimited access to your energy. And that's why nothing you've tried before to protect your energy without slowing yourself down has worked. You were taught to watch for strain, to guard against overload, to say no when things felt too much. But no one ever showed you how energy actually moves. Because it doesn't leak through pressure. It leaks through permission you give without thinking about the cost. Through moments that feel harmless, through adjustments you don't question, through access you never meant to grant, but you did it anyway. So here's where it helps to slow the conversation down just enough to look at what's actually happening underneath that day you just recognized. Because the cost you're paying isn't always loud. It doesn't always announce itself. And it doesn't always show up all at once. It shows up quietly, spread out across your day, across your week or month, in ways that feel normal enough that you rarely stop to question them. The first place you feel it is in how much of you is still available by the end of the day. Not your productivity, not your output, but your internal availability, how easily you can think, decide, and stay present without effort, instead of drained, wiped out, and operating with less internal margin than you started with. And your energy doesn't disappear in one big moment. It leaves in small withdrawals you never consciously approved. You don't remember giving it away. You don't remember choosing it. You just notice later that there's less of it available, especially when you need it the most. And because there's no single moment to point to, you assume it must be the nature of a full day. But it isn't. It's the accumulation of small access points that never felt big enough to stop. Then there's what happens to your focus. Not that it's gone, you're still capable, you're still thinking clearly, but it's divided. Your attention gets split across more threads than you intended to open. A quick shift here, a mental note there, something you'll circle back to later, and you end up carrying open loops you never planned to create. So that when you finally sit down to do the work that actually matters, it takes more activation than it should to drop back in because your focus has already been redirected multiple times. It's where deep work becomes possible, but it ends up taking more effort than normal. And then there's the cost of your momentum. And this is the part that most people misread because your momentum doesn't stop. You're still moving, you're still producing, you're still doing what needs to be done, but sustaining your pace takes more internal effort than it used to. And momentum starts feeling managed instead of fluid, where you're constantly adjusting, pushing just a little bit more, using more fuel to hold the same speed. And because you're so used to being capable, you barely notice how much energy that compensation requires until you realize that the same kind of day that used to feel clean now asks more from you just to maintain it. And when that happens, there's also a cost that shows up in how you make decisions because when your energy is being redirected without intention, your decisions start defaulting to speed. So you answer before checking in with yourself. You respond before sensing whether you actually have the capacity to, in the moment, to actually take it on, before checking how it's going to affect your focus later, before noticing what it will quietly trade off, because there's always a cost, right? There's always a trade to every yes. And you're saying yes before you hear yourself think, not because you don't know better, but because reflex feels easier and faster because it keeps you moving. It doesn't interrupt your flow, where discernment would actually require pausing to check alignment, capacity, and consequence. So when decisions get made quickly, they don't feel clean. And this is why patterns repeat, even when you're highly self-aware. You understand yourself, you reflect, you notice, but your decision system's still running on automatic access instead of intentional alignment. So here's what I want you to understand. Your energy isn't being taken. No one's stealing it. No one's crossing obvious lines. Nothing dramatic is happening. What's happening is you're giving it away quietly, automatically, in moments that never felt like decisions at all. And this is happening to you because you've never learned how to regulate access at the level where your energy actually moves. So, what is it that you want? Let's slow it down for a minute and talk about what's already been sitting underneath everything you do. You don't want to do less. You don't want to move slower, and you don't want to make your life smaller so it feels more manageable. What you want is energy that stays with you, right? Not energy that you have to constantly monitor or have to protect after the fact. But energy that holds to the day because it wasn't spent on things you didn't pause long enough to weigh, things that seemed harmless in the moment but slowly took first place over what actually mattered. You want to move through your day and still feel internally available at the end of it, clear enough to think, present enough to decide when things come across your plate because you have a decision framework that supports you, and to feel grounded enough to enjoy what comes next without feeling like you used everything up just to get through your day. You want your decisions to feel contained, finished, complete, right? Not where you have to mentally revisit them later. Not yeses that linger in the background, pulling on your attention. And you want a pace that feels supported, not upheld by effort, a rhythm that works with you instead of constantly asking more from you. And momentum that feels clean and fluid, not something you have to manage, correct, or push through. What you're looking for is for your energy to go where it actually matters, right? Not to have it spread so thin across a dozen small forgettable moments or leaked out through easy access that you never meant to give. And if you're really honest with yourself, what you really want is your energy to feel protected, without having to think about it all day, and for your decisions to support your momentum instead of draining it and not being pulled in a million directions by it. What you want is better. A better way of moving, a better way of deciding, and a better way of using the energy that you already have so that your days don't cost more than they should. And so here's where things can begin to shift and feel different, and also surprisingly relieving. Because the shift isn't about doing less or doing more. It's not about trying harder or learning how to say no better. It's about saying yes better, right? It's about learning how to say yes to the things that actually fuel you, inspire you, that support your flow, that support your energy. And that shift happens beneath the surface, because what changes is what gets access to you. Because up until now, your system has been operating on speed, on capability, on the assumption that if something feels manageable, it can come through. But when everything's built around response, speed becomes the default, which means nothing in your decision process has been designed to pause access or discern whether something is a yes, a no, or a not right now. So the reframe that will bring clarity to what's been missing is that you need a cleaner filter, one that operates before energy spreads, before focus fragments, before momentum starts asking more from you than it should. It's not about becoming selective in a rigid way. It's about becoming precise so that your energy goes exactly where you intend it to go instead of being spent by default. Because right now, what's been costing you isn't effort, it's exposure. Too many small things touching your energy without you even realizing they ever got through. And once you see that, the shift then becomes obvious, because that's when you start noticing the moment before you respond. That split second where something enters your field, a message, a request, a shift, an ask that looks harmless on the surface. And instead of automatically folding it in, you decide to do things differently. You don't stop, you don't freeze, you don't deliberate, you just simply notice and you ask yourself, does this deserve access to me right now? Is this aligned with what I'm protecting today? Will this strengthen or dilute my momentum? Sometimes the answer is yes, and it's a clean yes, one that doesn't linger, one that doesn't pull at you later. Sometimes the answer is not right now, and nothing collapses because of it, because you actually understand what's a fit and what's not right now. And sometimes the answer is no, not because it's wrong, but because it just doesn't belong, and it will pull energy away from what's really important for you right now. And the most important part, none of this slows you down. In fact, it does the opposite. Because when access is clear, your energy stays contained, your focus stays intact, your momentum stays fluid, and you stop spending energy recovering from decisions you never meant to make in the first place, that were never on your radar. You stop managing the after effects, the mental reentry, the mental residue, and the subtle drag that shows up later. This is why the shift feels like relief instead of effort, because you're not changing who you are. You're not becoming someone new. You're not trying to override your natural rhythm. You're simply giving your energy a container that moves at the same speed that you do, in flow with you. So instead of leaking out through easy access, your energy starts staying where it belongs, with what matters, with what moves you forward, with what you actually choose. This is the access shift, because you finally have the filter in place that helps you, so you understand what everything else feels incomplete or feels out of place, that feels out of flow. And you have a decision framework that allows you to decide quickly, but staying in momentum, but that also supports you. And once you feel it, you don't need to force it. So before we move any further, I want you to pause for just a minute. I want you to think back over the last few days, and I want to ask you, where did your energy leave without a clear, conscious decision? Not the big things, not the obvious commitments, but the small moments that felt so reasonable at the time that you didn't clock them as choices. What did you fold in automatically that seemed easy in the moment, but showed up later as mental noise, heavier focus, or an energy drain? Where did you say yes, not out of pressure, but out of habit? And only later you realize it cost you way more than you expected it to. And where are you responding, adjusting, or accommodating out of habit, not choice, right? So as you sit with this, I want you to notice what comes up in your body before your mind explains it away. That tightening in your shoulders, that, oh, yeah, I see it now. That moment, right? That's not judgment. That's awareness arriving before explanation, before your mind turns it into a story. You see, when you can see where your energy is already moving by default, you're no longer operating in the dark. And that awareness is where everything starts to shift. So here's what I want you to remember. High-achieving women don't say yes or make decisions because someone tells them to. They make decisions when something finally clicks, when they see themselves clearly enough to recognize the pattern that's been running the show, and the moment they're ready to shift it. And if today's episode helps something snap into focus for you, if you caught yourself thinking, this is exactly where my energy goes, or this is the moment my yes gets expensive, that matters, because when your system shows you the pattern, that's your signal that it's time to shift, that you're ready to shift it. And here's the truth. You can have the best intentions, the strongest work ethic, the deepest self-awareness. But if your decision system isn't built to protect your energy in real time, you'll stay in cycles that don't support you, that don't support your time, and that don't support your energy. That's where the Yes Reset method comes in. It becomes the internal checkpoint that replaces pressure-driven decisions with clarity-driven ones, not by slowing you down, but by giving you a decision architecture that supports the way you actually function so that your yes stays clean, grounded, and energy protective instead of reflexive. And if you're listening and you're thinking, I want to see what this looks like in my life, I want to understand how this applies to the way I move through my day, then I want to invite you to book a Yes Reset strategy call with me. This is not a sales call. It's a clarity conversation where you and I'll sit down and we'll look at the way you're currently making decisions, where your energy is leaking, where your reflexes are overriding your intentions, and where your pace is being shaped by habits that no longer support the way you want to move. We'll identify where your autopilot yes is costing you and how applying the Yes Reset method can help you create the kind of clean, supported pace you've been wanting, the kind where your yes actually works for you instead of against you. And you'll walk away understanding how your system is operating now, the patterns driving your energy drains, and what shifts will create the clean, aligned pace you want to move at. No pressure, just support that helps your decisions feel cleaner and less mentally expensive. So if today you felt that internal click, that moment of recognition, then the next step is to book your Yes Reset strategy call with me, and the link to book is in the show notes. So before we go, I want you to take a moment and really let this land. It's not about changing who you are or becoming someone new. You're not fixing anything about yourself. You're not broken. What's happening is more powerful than that because you're refining how you move. You're starting to trust what you feel before your mind rushes in to explain it away. You're noticing the signals earlier. You're sensing when something fits and when it pulls from you. And instead of automatically accommodating, adjusting, or absorbing, you're choosing alignment, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. The way your day feels when your energy stays with you, the way your decisions feel when they're complete, not lingering, and the way your pace feels when it's supported instead of propped up by constant effort. Again, it's not about slowing down or pulling back. It's about moving forward with clarity so that your energy stays where it belongs, your momentum stays clean, and your days stop costing you energy you never meant to spend. This is what it feels like when your life starts working with you again, when your energy stays close instead of being scattered, when your focus comes back without force, when your days don't feel like something you have to recover from afterward. When this happens, nothing about you has changed. You didn't become less capable. You didn't lower your standards. You just simply stopped letting your energy drift without intention. And once you feel this difference, once your days start feeling cleaner, steadier, and more yours, you realize that this is how you were always meant to move. Thanks for listening today. I hope you have an incredible week. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep designing your extraordinary life one day at a time. Thank you for joining me on Her Extraordinary Life by Design. I hope you've been inspired and empowered by the incredible stories shared on this show. If you enjoyed this episode and the conversations we've had, I would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback and support mean the world to me, and it will help others discover the podcast and join our empowering community. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can continue to learn from these amazing women, uncover their extraordinary journeys, and be motivated to create our own lives by design. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, stay empowered and keep shaping your extraordinary life one day at a time.
This episode is brought to you by Marqeta. When it comes to your payments provider, you can't afford to compromise. Marqeta's modern payment solutions flex with your business without the trade-offs. Stable and agile, secure and innovative. scalable, and configurable. If they say you can't have it all, don't believe them. Your business demands more. Choose a payments provider that delivers more. Choose Marqeta. Visit Marqeta.com/Spotify to learn more.
Been out here all morning. Not a single bite. Guess the fish finally figured it out. Just like hackers do when Cisco Duo's on guard. With Duo's end-to-end phishing resistance, every login, every device, every user stays protected. No hooks, no catches, no bites. Cisco Duo. Phishing season is over. Learn more at duo.com.
Electric acid.